don't think about leadership when they own a small business. So I've got an expert, and we're going to talk about why it's important to be a leader when you're a small business owner and franchisee.
This is the Franchise Pitfalls and Profit Show. Each week, we bring you the challenges and triumphs of being in the franchise development and consulting business. The things you need to make money faster. And now your host, one of the most successful franchise developers in North America, Don Shin.
All right, audience, I am really jazzed to have an expert on leadership with us. Luke and I have known each other for well over a year now. He has the experience of being a franchisee. He was the first. He shares that common bond with me that he was the first franchisee in the United States for the brand that he purchased. He successfully exited when the company changed strategies and wanted to own all the territories themselves. So he had a successful exit. He has been a firefighter for almost 20 years, and we thank him for his service. A phenomenal commitment to volunteering. And today we're going to talk about leadership, the importance of leadership in small business ownership, and we consider franchisees small business owners. And so Luke has been training and coaching people, franchisees, on leadership, and that's why I thought it'd be really, really valuable to have him on the program with us. So Luke, thanks for being with me. I appreciate it.
Don, I appreciate you having me on. It's always good to be able to talk about leadership and franchising in particular.
Yep. And Luke has come on board to collaborate with Franchise Building Expert, FBE. So Luke, in addition to being a trainer and a coach in the leadership segment of franchising, he is also a consultant, helping people find the right franchise, which clearly for some people that is their challenge. They're not in the right franchise, but that's a topic for another show. So hey, Luke, because you've been a franchisee, you've been there, done that, as I like to say it. Let's just get started talking about what was your thoughts and your vision when you first started, and how did that work out? You've successfully exited. So what was your vision? What were your thoughts when you first got started?
Well, when I first got started, it was back in 1998, and I was not the ideal franchisee for Image First, and it was a father and son company, Jerry and Jeff Burstein, but I had worked with them for a year in another division, and my family and I had some reasons that we were moving back to Cincinnati, and I began my job search. And about 2 weeks into that, Jerry came to me and we were having a conversation. He said, "We're starting to sell franchises. Would you like to be the first?" And man, that hit two nails on the head for me. Number one, it got me back to Cincinnati. But number two, after being in the corporate world for 7 years, I knew that I wanted to get out on my own doing something. And this was a perfect opportunity to do it. And being their first franchisee, I knew they had a little more stake in the game.
Yeah.
Because I had to be successful in order for them to be able to spread elsewhere.
Awesome. And I've had some conversations with people through social media about the feeling that in some cases, in general, franchisors are just wanting to put more people out there and aren't that concerned about the success of their franchisees. So as you match people to franchises, as our company matches people to franchises, we want to be sure that the culture is there of helping franchisees. So as you entered, what do you think was one of your biggest challenges, and what do you think was one of your biggest successes?
My biggest challenge was the sales end of it, to be able to try and find pain points. I came from an engineering background, so I came from strictly numbers, and I had to learn a little bit of sales when we would do a new time frame installation for a particular line. You had to sell it while we were doing it. So the sales end of it was the most difficult to begin with. And I was fortunate that they sent Mark Sussman, who was their sales director at the time. They sent him out every other week, and he would spend 4 days with me, teaching me what it was like to be in the trenches. And again, they probably didn't do that for every franchise after me, but they did that with me for the first 6 months. He was with me every other week for at least 3 days, and usually 4. So he taught me the ropes. We also made a switch in there because we started by focusing our daily search around a particular hospital. All the doctors are around there, so we set our sales day up for that situation. What we came to realize, though, is that was about the time that surgery centers became popular. Hospitals didn't want to do surgeries where people could walk out, so ambulatory surgery centers became big. And we didn't rent to hospitals because we didn't want patients on our sheets and wearing our gowns for more than 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. So instead of focusing on the hospitals, we switched and made sure that we were focusing on surgery centers and hit surgery centers to begin with. And one of my very first big clients, well, they were my big client for about 2 years, was called the Urology Group in Cincinnati. And we started them right from their beginning as well. And they grew into about a $3,000 a week account.
Awesome. So being willing, having the personality and the willingness to be a pioneer, that's a lot of people have called me a pioneer because I was the first one out there doing it. And so that willingness to be a pioneer actually has some real benefits because the franchisor will really pour more into you. And you got the opportunity to strategize. This is one of the things I loved about what I did. I got the opportunity to really impact the overall brand in the United States because I was one of the early ones and they wanted to tap into that. And you had that same experience.
Well, we did the same thing because I was not their ideal franchisee, and their ideal was someone who already owned a local or regional dry cleaner or laundromat or something like that to fill in capacity with the medical linen. And I didn't have any capital equipment. And in the 20 years that I worked or that I owned Image First, I never owned a piece of capital equipment. We subcontracted all of that out to somebody who was in the healthcare laundry field already. So we knew that their processes were in place, and we built up other systems and kind of build a sub operations manual for the non-ideal franchisees like me. And they ended up with a handful of others.
That's cool. So let's transition then into, and this will lead us into the leadership, the having leadership skills or recognizing you need them. So what do you think today? You're deep into the franchise industry in a couple of different ways. You're talking to a lot of people about becoming a business owner through franchising. You're coaching franchisees. So what do you think it takes, one or two things? What do you think it takes to be successful in business now, to be that entrepreneur in a franchise concept?
Yeah, what it takes is to actually become the CEO of your small business that happens to own a franchise. You're an entrepreneur, and when you're in franchising, you basically are buying the operations manual, you're buying the brand name, and you're buying some support along the way. But it's still up to you to be the CEO of your company and to drive your company. One of the biggest things that I see new franchisees, and they may have started like I did as an owner operator. It was my job. It was a great job that I was building up, but it was my job to begin with. It wasn't until I became a fire chief and saw that leadership actually transfers from organization to organization. And the more leadership that you can instill in a small business, the greater you'll be able to grow it.
Yep. And there are different models in franchising. I think the traditional model truly has been what you just described. you're an owner operator. You step into the business, and depending on where you build it to will depend on how many people you might have to hire and manage. But there's also the manager, owner or owner manager type business where you're really not, you're there every day, but you're really not doing the business. You're really hiring people to do the business. And I think that one, and probably the semi-absentee passive, where you're really not in the business every day, but you've still got to lead the managers. You still got to lead the leaders. So that's awesome. So let's shift that gear then. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. Let's shine the light on some of the challenges, these leadership challenges that the business owners are, and even franchisees are having. Where would you start there? What do you think are a couple of things, Luke?
A couple of things, and it depends on where you are in the maturity of your franchise ownership. But as you're transferring the first 2 years, first 3 years, you are on, for the most part, you're on overdrive to get that business up and running. Even with the semi-absentee models, you're in the business a little bit more because you're the face of that business locally. You're the face of that business in the community. So that's the first couple of years. The transition year that I run into the most is around the third or fourth year, where now you are hiring and you have the cash flow to be able to become a semi-absentee owner. What are you going to do with that? Mm-hmm. How are you going to number one, lead yourself? I'm a firm believer in Maxwell's first law, the law of the lid. So your franchise is only going to grow as far as you grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what a lot of business owners, small business owners, have difficulty understanding is that culture is everything. Mm-hmm. We hear about culture in big businesses and, that kind of thing. But in a small business, your culture keeps your people around. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate. Of the 7 positions that Image First had, 4 of my employees were with me for 15 years or more. One gentleman was with me all 17 years he worked for us. So, awesome. That helped with the continuity, because any of the times, being a small business, whenever we had to replace one of those other 3 positions, it threw a wrench into the small business that we hadn't planned for. Absolutely. And being a small business, you don't have the fat to be able to absorb it.
Yep.
And it lasts for years down the road.
Yeah. When you talk about that team, adding someone, changing someone, I always looked at when someone left, I looked at it as an opportunity to kind of reorganize, because sometimes things change and the people you have, you're not going to get rid of them, but sometimes they're really not the right people for where you're going. They were the right people for a while, but not where you're going. And I always looked at those as opportunities. But the interesting dynamic, and I'll just share a quick story. And when the training that I went to as a franchisee, our company had these morning volleyball games before our classes actually started, and it was done to identify people's characteristics in the games. Games can be a real reflection of who somebody is when you're playing games. And so we were in this situation. It was kind of a weird situation. We're playing 3 against 2. I was on the 2-man team, and we were losing most of the time, but we had kind of worked out a system where we knew who was going to get which ball in what place of the court. And we got it down to where we were kind of holding our own. And then the founder of the company came in one morning, and this was all by design. The founder of the company comes in one morning to play volleyball with us. And, he's like, I don't know, I think he's 6'5" or 6'6". And my teammate and I are going, oh man, this is like really cool. We're going to crush these guys. Well, we didn't, because of exactly what you said, that dynamic of a new player on the team. You just don't know where everybody's going to move. You don't know how that all fits in, and it takes time to make the new team work. So awesome example, awesome story. Now, and I'm really going to put you on the spot here. So we didn't talk about this question at all. So, but hiring has really been a challenge during and after the pandemic. So I got to think this is one thing that you're, as you talk about building, a key factor, building culture for the franchisees in their small business. So any tips or any things that you coach on today around hiring that's made it a little bit easier for your clients to hire the right people for their culture?
Sure. The way I look at hiring and employees is kind of like going out and finding your correct fit on your clients and customers. You find where you get the best leads, and that's not only for a conversion rate. It's how do they fit in with the culture that you're building. So you go to those networking type events, and just like our 13 different marketing strategies for franchise development, you want to start with a wider net when you start your business, and then narrow that net down to 2 or 3 different hiring strategies or sources of leads from which you get your best hires.
Yep. I was, the company I came from, obviously the franchise I was involved in was a training and coaching company. And yeah, we always approached hiring, as you said, very similar to getting clients. You've got to use multiple strategies. You've got to have a headline and something that pulls people into the conversation. So I appreciate you sharing that. So,
well, and Don, I'll add on to this because that was one of the biggest challenges I had to overcome as a franchise owner, was learning how, especially to hire a salesperson. That was very difficult. And until I got that down, it took about 2 or 3 years in the middle of my ownership where I wasn't having good success finding salespeople. So consequently, my business didn't grow the way that it should have grown in those 2 or 3 years because I was the salesperson and still doing everything else. So learning how, and that's where that law of the lid comes in. I didn't know how to do it, and it held us back. So learning how to do something that's a challenge real quick and as soon as you can identify it, and that's where the self-awareness comes in of being a leader.
Yeah. So learning how to do something new is really important. You said building the culture is really important. What other kinds of things are you finding that business owners, franchisees, as small business owners, what other kinds of things are you working on with them? What kinds of questions, should they be asking and of themselves?
Yeah. The biggest one that I work on is vision.
Okay.
Always, number one, you need to have that vision going in. And I like to say on a scale of 1 to 10, you need your vision to be between a 7.5 to 10 in order to be successful in business and to move forward. And that vision is going to change over time. So you want to review that vision and where is it leading you now? Maybe you're having a different walk with God this year than you were having last year. So you need to factor that into what is the vision for your company. I'm a firm believer in you and I have talked about this in our meetings before, in avoda, which is the ancient Hebrew word for work, worship, and serve. And it all ties together, especially when you have a small business. And people throw the family term around with small business. You still have to make the tough decisions. So it's not quite a family, but it can be better than a family. It doesn't necessarily have to.
Yeah, for sure. So my show's name is Franchising Pitfalls and Profits. So So as we're sort of wrapping up a little bit here, um, give me your thoughts on leadership and how that applies or converts into profit for the franchisee, for the small business owner.
Absolutely. And I think you know that I work for the framework I work with the franchisees is called the Franchise Owners Dashboard. Um, and it basically lays out 8 different overarching leadership areas. The key to it is it keeps them focused. It keeps my clients and franchisees focused on what 3 strategies do I need to accomplish in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months. Being a business owner, especially in a small business, it's very easy to get sidetracked with all kinds of different priorities that are coming in at you and different needs. So having that focused, being able to look down and say, okay, what am I doing today? And I do this every Sunday night or Monday morning. What am I accomplishing this week that gets me a step closer to my executive dashboard? Because I do this myself.
Yep. That's awesome. So, all right. So in just kind of wrapping us up, then I always ask this question. Is there anything else that you want to say, you want to share on the topic of leadership, on the topic of buying a franchise, on the topic of getting into the right franchise? Anything else that, as you were preparing to talk to our audience, anything else that you wanted to be sure that you communicated before we wrap up?
Absolutely. If anybody is contemplating getting into business for themselves, check out franchising. There's 3 different ways to get into business ownership. You can start up your own business. You can buy an existing business, which is 80 to 90% fail rate because of culture for the most part, or you can get into franchising to start your business. And when I say building an empire, I'm not necessarily talking about wealth. I'm talking about your community impact, your impact on your employees and their lives. So absolutely check out Franchise Building Expert. We are doing it differently than I've seen anybody else do it. And we have a lot more experience than most. So that's a shout out to Don and his group. And I'm just happy to be part of it.
All right, sir. So audience, if you are an existing franchisee, or if you're contemplating owning a business of your own, even whether it's through franchising or not, the keys you want to remember from what Luke has shared is be the CEO of your company. Even if you're CEO of yourself and you're only starting by yourself, be the CEO, lead yourself. As you start to bring people on, establish the culture that you want, have a clarity on the vision. And if you're going to make a profit consistently, you got to be focused on what's got to be done. And I'll add the 90-day planning. We work a lot on 90-day plans. You've got to be focused on what's going to move your company forward. Luke, man, you've been awesome. And I appreciate your being with me.
Don, thank you. Bless you.